So yesterday, Wednesday, January 29th, 2025, we had ourselves an article published on dailyfaceoff.com by Frank Seravalli. And it was a piece that was super interesting because it was long. There are, I want to say, maybe like 1,500 words in this article, and it all goes over one guy. Here's the piece, it'll be linked in the description. Canadiens' Jake Evans could be a missing piece for a cup contender's bottom six. And yeah, this is an entire deep dive into Jake Evans of the Montreal Canadiens. As always, this show is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Go out there and click the first link in the description if you want to dive into the Express, save some money, get some free months, and support the channel all in the process. But this article is also going to be linked there too. I will say, it doesn't give a lot of new information about the player, but there are some extra tidbits of information about the situation that I do think are interesting to dive into. So, all the player stuff, hey, this is all stuff we've talked about before. Jake Evans, center, Montreal Canadiens, right-handed 28-year-old 6'1", 187 guy, $1.7 million, pending UFA. Career stats, he's had 117 points in 317 games, but this season he's got 25 points in 49 games played. This has been his best season, and he has had one Stanley Cup Final appearance. Although I don't think he actually played in the Stanley Cup Finals. He was injured, right? Mark Scheifele? Oh wait, no, he came back! Right, that's exactly the truth. Jake Evans did return and played 3 games against the Tampa Bay Lightning, scoring himself a point. Oh yeah, my goodness, how could I have forgotten that? Anyways, Jake Evans is a shutdown forward, third-line center, a highly intelligent role player. Ideally, on a true Stanley Cup contending team, Evans would be pushed down to a fourth-line center role, but he has shown so far this season that he is eminently capable of taking on tough assignments and still finding ways to produce. He could also play on the wing on a team with center depth. He should be featured on the team's first penalty-killing unit. The reason I like this article is because it's really long. Like, it goes over an entire scouting report as to what Evans was doing with the Junior A Hockey St. Michael's Buzzers team, and when he was drafted, and what he had done, and everything else in between, how he's gotten all these shorthanded goals, and how he's one of only 4 players in the NHL with 3 or more shorthanded goals this season, trailing only Sam Reinhart for the league lead. Evans creates chances while shorthanded using his stick and instincts to jump on loose pucks. He does not cheat for opportunities. Offensively, Evans is having a career season as evidenced by his 21.6% shooting percentage, which is well more than double his career average. He already is 2 goals away from a career high. That might scare off some teams, but if you watch Evans' game closely, he has been very selective on his shot attempts. He doesn't force poor quality shots and is actually more prone to setting up teammates than taking the shot himself. The article then dives into the buyer beware part. He isn't super skilled, he's not going to dominate in a skills competition, he's not very physical, and he's not really flashy, but he is definitely competent. For as much time as Evans spends on the PK, he has struggled to win draws in the defensive zone while shorthanded. His overall faceoff numbers are solid, but Evans is just a 42% while shorthanded in his own end. Given that he has taken the 5th most faceoffs while shorthanded in the NHL this season, that might be a concern moving forward as teams will look to win possession and get that 200-foot clear to begin a kill. That's interesting, and it's potentially the only place where I've seen this criticism pop up, like, hey, everybody loves to talk about how good Jake Evans is, but for the first time, I'm seeing somebody actually talk about how his face-off percentage isn't great. Very interesting. Now, when it comes to the potential suitors, this is where things get even more interesting, because out of the 5 names that are listed here, the first one actually does have a pretty juicy bit of information. The dailyfaceoff.com article says here, the Washington Capitals. We believe the Caps were the team that tried to acquire Jake Evans last summer at the draft in exchange for a second-round pick. And that makes some sense. They've tried to fit that 3C role this year with Lars Eller, but Evans would be a better fit. The rest of the article dives into some other teams that could be good for Jake Evans and some comparable trade returns, but I wanted to dive into Washington in particular, because if you head over to the Washington Capitals and their lines this season, there are quite a few guys that are just bringing some of the best hockey they have had in their entire careers pretty much. That first line of Ovechkin, Strome, Wilson has been pretty good. Alexei Protosh has been fantastic alongside of Pierre-Luc Dubois. And then on the third line, you do have Lars Eller as the guy alongside of Taylor Radish and Ethan Frank. Ethan Frank, by the way, super underrated pickup who has been awesome in the Washington system. What a great out-of-nowhere development story for this team. And, of course, no disrespect whatsoever to former Montreal Canadien Lars Eller, but I do think that Jake Evans does what Eller does just a little bit better. Eller, of course, was never really one of the top point producing guys, even when he was with the Montreal Canadiens. He's 35 now, by the way, so certainly in the latter stages of his NHL career. But Lars Eller has been fine with Washington. He actually is back in Washington for the first time since 2023. He did take a few years off with Pittsburgh and Colorado. But if you're in a spot where you're able to bring on Jake Evans, he can be your third line guy, and you move Lars Eller down to the fourth line to replace Nick Dowd, you're probably in a really good spot. Evans, of course, has been the bee's knees this season. Everybody loves talking about Jake Evans. Everybody loves talking about Heineman and Armia, and that line was so good together until Heineman got hurt. But for Jake Evans in particular, this is a guy whose value is a lot more than just a second-round pick this year. There's a reason Washington went out there and went for that swing last year, and the way that Daily Faceoff says it here, I mean, it seems like the trade proposal was rejected by Montreal. They believe the Caps were the team that tried to acquire Evans at the draft for a second-round pick. Man, would that trade have been bad for Kent Hughes had it went down. At least with hindsight. I get that maybe last year, if Jake Evans, who at the time wasn't as competent as he is right now, or maybe not as poised, if last year's Jake Evans was traded for a second, I don't think anybody would have said it was a terrible deal. But Jake Evans right now? Oh yeah. Let's see a late first-round pick for that dude. Let's see a second and a nice prospect for this guy. Salary retained? Maybe you're going to have to add on a little bit more. The Washington Capitals have had some really good deals with these guys the past little while. I think the biggest one that everybody doesn't really talk about as much as they should is the Alexei Protosh deal. Yeah, everybody's been talking about Protosh this season, the big forward that the Capitals drafted in the third round a few years ago. He's signed on till 2029, making $3.3 million a year. And he's on pace for 70 points. That dude is a steal of a contract. And if Washington was able to get him on some sort of a bargain, they're able to get the best out of Lindstrom, who admittedly has been slowed down a little bit ever since Ovechkin left the lineup and subsequently returned. Yeah, it's weird. Lindstrom is not as productive as he was at the start of the season, but some of these other guys, man, Pierre-Luc Dubois has been carrying his weight. Tom Wilson looks great too. Lars Eller has been fine. But Jake Evans, he could be a little bit better. So Washington, sorry, a second-round pick that's not going to go through. The trade was rejected once. It certainly would be rejected again. Let's dive into even more. Let's see some top-tier prospects coming over to Montreal. And if Jake Evans wants to do Montreal a solid, he can accept a trade. He can get traded to Washington for multiple draft picks and a prospect, and then he can come back to Montreal in the offseason with a 5-year deal that he wants. Who knows? Not everybody can be as graceful and team-friendly as Antoine Vermette was with the Arizona Coyotes when he went to Chicago to win a cup, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this rejected trade from Washington's POV, how they wanted to get Jake Evans from the Habs, they wanted to give up a second-round pick, but it seems like the Habs said no. The rest of this Daily Faceoff article will go over trade comparables and other teams, so you could go out there and click the link in the description to read the piece and see yourself what it is that the Daily Faceoff writers think Jake Evans could do with other organizations. Also, check out ExpressVPN. If you really do need a VPN, Express is one of the best in the business, and you can help out the channel by clicking our link. Thoughts in the comment section below about this Jake Evans trade idea. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.